brother!
And welcome everyone to our Inside Out 2 review.
Oh man, this felt like high stakes, you know? Like this channel in so many ways, I feel like the cornerstone of it is the Pixar theory. And it's felt like for a little while here, the studio of Pixar has not necessarily been able to swing the swings that we've historically known to come from.
Them to swung?
Yeah, them to swung. So it felt like coming into the Inside Out franchise, like come back to it, which is arguably become, like Inside Out the original, one of my favorite Pixar movies.
Oh dude, it has just aged like fine wine. It is like, the older I get, the better the first Inside Out gets.
It is, and I feel like it provides such an incredible dialogue for like how to speak about emotions to like one another. It's like, I genuinely almost see it as like a gift to the world.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely it is. And like, I feel like Inside Out 2 delivered on that, like all of those fronts again.
I know,
and
yeah.
like, and maybe a little bit more like nuanced way. Like here, it's exactly what you'd expect too. Like the first one, it's like, yeah, there's the 5. These are the core ones. This is basic. Here's how it is. Now you're a little bit older, and we can get a little bit more nuanced with it.
Yes.
And talk about it a little bit more like, I don't know. What is the word I'm going for?
Well, I think even in the film, they almost like refer to, or like I think Joy says like, you know, maybe Riley needs more advanced emotions. And so it's like the fact that we've got this baseline, and now we are dealing with emotions that like are not as necessarily like core, but like are things that we all deal with. Especially, I feel like in today's world, anxiety is something that more and more people are discovering that they are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is clearly, I mean, it's the main other character. It's like joy and anxiety are the two main emotions in the movie.
Right.
And like anxiety is center stage, and there are so many times when you're watching the movie where, I don't know if you felt this way, but where I was just like, oh, that was too real. Or like,
yes.
Oh, that one hurts.
100%.
Like they go down and do like the belief system, which I thought was a really cool thing. Like, oh, we're exploring new areas of the mind. This is fun. There's like the sense of self has started to develop. And even like that makes sense, where it's just sort of like, you know, before that, Riley had her core memories. Like they like sort of defined her personality, but as she grows up, as she gets to like puberty and has a little bit more independence, you have more of a sense of self, and like there's a literal representation of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then there's like the beliefs, and the way they like made those work, and they like strummed them like, you know, guitar chords or something, and they would like sing out what they were. It was like, oh, this is cool. And like the way they like I loved how, you know, headquarters goes down there, but then like the belief system is like surrounded by this river, which is the stream of consciousness.
Yes.
And the stream of consciousness is full of certain memories, which I thought that was so clever, because it's like, these are your beliefs right now, but they're all based on memories in your current stream of consciousness. So if you add new memories to it, or things float downstream or whatever, they might not be the current memories that are like activating your beliefs right now. Like your beliefs are fluid.
Yes.
You know, like I really loved that representation. But like, you know, I think when like the new sense of self takes over, and it like the whole time it's just been like, I'm a good person, and then they string it and it's like, I'm not good enough. I was like, oh no.
I know.
Oh,
yes.
No.
Yeah. You're like,
I was like, what is it gonna say? What's it gonna say? Not that. No.
It's you're right. Yeah, that's where you get into moments inside of this movie where it's almost just like, is it too real?
I know.
But I think that's really just demonstrating the way that I think Pixar hit the nail directly on the head.
On the head.
Dealing with these things, and again for continuing to illustrate like what is happening inside of this like amorphous shape that is the inner workings of our brains.
I know. And like I always felt this about the first one. They're like, what they absolutely nailed was using a character like using a 10-year-old girl who as the main character, and making Riley like a character that anyone could project themselves on, despite her being like a little girl from Minnesota who likes hockey. You know, like I'm not that at all, but it was not hard to relate to Riley at all.
No, I totally agree.
And the same thing is here. It's like, I was never a teenage girl who went through puberty. That didn't happen to me.
Right.
But, and I never played hockey, but like, you know what? Everything about what was happening, still very relatable. Like, still had difficult situations with friends and shifting friends groups and even if you didn't play hockey or even if you didn't play sports, you probably did something.
Yes.
Like that you could fill in the blank with right there, that like it is like, yeah, all of these things felt very like real situations.
Right, yeah. Like what is the activity or moment or thing that you discovered somewhere along the way in your existence that ended up being that like that sounding board where if only I blank, then I will win approval, and approval will mean friends, and friends will mean like happiness and success and longevity and, you know, all the things that we all want out of life, versus that like vision that Riley has of herself at some point in time where she's like sitting on a bench feeding the pigeons and then eventually just like dies alone and is a skeleton sitting there. And it's
right.
Like,
yeah.
You know, that's always like the like, you know, inside of like a therapy based conversation. I feel like you can so often have that like the therapist might look at you and be like, okay, what is the worst case scenario? Like what could happen? And then what? And then what? And it's sort of like what they're trying to do is almost like pull that string to get you to realize that like the whole world around you is not going to go up into an inferno if this one thing doesn't play out the way that you thought it might or needs to. But it doesn't mean that we haven't all also felt it, and it also doesn't mean that those feelings inside of them aren't completely valid. Like you need to know how to navigate.
And that was another good message I thought about this movie, was that like anxiety isn't like strictly negative.
Right.
Like anxiety shows up and like takes the wheel a few times, and like for a good chunk of the movie, like it's clear like, you know, she pretty quickly gets rid of the other emotions, but like some of the things she's doing are helping Riley get ahead. Like, you know, gets her to wake up early, and the other emotions are sort of like, I don't know if we got to do this, but it's like, no, by the end of that little session, she's like better at hockey.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like that she feels like she's embarrassed herself in front of the older skater whose name is escaping me, Val, like right away, and anxiety takes over and like goes and talks to her, and everyone's sort of like, well, I'm not sure that's necessary. You're laying it on a little thick, but sure enough, walks away from the conversation, and it's like, no, Val's like, yeah, come hang out with us later.
Dude, that was like the part of the movie where I was like, oh my gosh, is this movie like made for me?
Dude,
because exactly, I think like what you just said, like it took me well into my adult life to identify like what the things that I've been experiencing are in fact anxiety. And it's like, it's strange to think of something that is usually universally received as such a negative to imagine it as this superpower, because I do think at times my anxiety has like driven me to perform. Like it is a motivational force, and in the proper dosages, you know, there is a way that it can be beneficial to your existence.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like a lot of like what you needed to establish very early on, is that like strictly speaking, it's not so bad. But obviously as anxiety continues to like build and build and build, it becomes a cyclone.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah. I mean, like the anxiety attack at the end is just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
That was like hard to watch.
It is.
Like, I mean, you're like, oh boy, that's what it feels like. Yup. Nothing can get through. And it's like, here we go. Yeah, obviously she does get through it. But overall, thought it was a great. I loved all the messaging in the movie. I thought it was funny and like well paced, and I mean it hits a lot of like almost like beat for beat story beats from the first one.
It definitely
does. A lot
of
the way.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's like a problem or anything. It still felt fresh and new, and we've both seen it twice now. You just saw it like the second time like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, I literally just walked back to the office.
Right back to the theater. Yep.
So we got our notes. We can basically, I think, you know, if you want to start at the beginning, we can just like race our way through it and see what we discover. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, so we kick off at the beginning of Inside Out 2. For one, I guess there was just a brief mention of the fact that there was no short before.
There was no short, surprising.
Yeah, so just inside of the world of Pixar, that kind of feels like one of like the universal like stamps that we've sort of come to know for what these films are like. But in the world where Disney Plus exists, it also seems like those shorts are still being made. They're just clips.
Yeah, they're just
somewhere.
sort of coming out on their own more frequently.
Right.
On just straight to Disney Plus. And I think even last time, what was the Pixar movie before this one? Elemental. Yeah, they just had like they had a short, but it was like Carl's date or something.
Carl's first date.
Yeah. Or I guess something like that.
Second date.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Riley's first date was one of the shorts. So
okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But anyway, so that's just worth mentioning because it's like one of those things that it felt like the Pixar experience did always include the short. So if anybody's listening and wants our take on it, I would love shorts.
Yeah,
it's always a fun way to kind of get you like warmed up. For what you're about to dive into.
That's getting warmed up though. As the Disney logos come out and the Pixar logo come out, they played the Inside Out theme from the first movie.
Yes.
Right away, but then they don't really play that again throughout the movie until like the credits. Yeah, I noticed that. So like they're like, it's still there, it's here, but we're like, it's like.
But you know what's amazing about that though is that like that music, like when you think of iconic music in movies, like like Star Wars or Harry Potter, or like any of those types of things, it's like you know the music, but like it was unbelievable to me how iconic the music was from the original to where it was like as soon as it started playing, I was like, oh, we're back.
I know.
It's like, oh man.
I know, but it's such emotional music too, which is like, I know that the movie's about emotions, but like as soon as it started playing, I was like, oh no. I feel it already.
Am I gonna make it?
The logo's aren't even done.
Right.
Yeah.
But that being said, so then the logos roll through, and we basically kick things off with the foghorns.
Yeah, foghorns. That's how we ended the last movie. So we're right back, except we're older.
Picking up right where we left off, and we can see that Riley is out there, and honestly, like the piece of animation that they used to kick the movie off with did feel like Pixar sort of like cracking their knuckles a little bit, because it's a really cool hockey scene.
Yeah, it is.
And it's like you're getting to see like Riley like on full display, like she's totally killing it. Like it's she's just like cutting, carving, dicing. They did like a lot of like really close-up shots of like the blades on the ice, where there was like it would make like this incredibly satisfying like click, click, like and like you'd like watch her feet like dance over each other.
Yes.
Loved that. We sort of get that like little bit of like setup with the foul in the opening game, where it's kind of like, oh man, like our girl committed a foul and it's in the penalty box.
Right?
Like what?
Look at her, man. And it's like, even as that, it feels like the reason, like as you're watching, it feels like the reason everything happens the way it does in the first game is for the sake of like reintroducing you, the audience, to the emotions again.
Yes.
Like, here's the familiar players. Now we need a reason for Riley to be angry. What could that be? Okay, let's make something that happen or whatever.
Yes.
But what's clever is that that's clearly what they're doing, but then like the moment where she gets sent to the penalty box ends up being like a plot point later on.
Yes, it definitely does, which I think is like definitely like a good way to like weave the story together to where it's not just sort of like, hey, here's this thing, like it's irrelevant, but like it's gonna keep echoing in the future. It's like no, it's very central.
Yes.
So you're right. So you go inside the box, you sort of get the intro to each of the team members. We do have 2 change-ups in the casting for Fear and Disgust.
Yep.
I noticed ever so slightly more, the voice of Forky in Toy Story 4.
Oh, Tony Hale.
Tony Hale is the voice of Fear, which I acclimated to, but I noticed the difference in Fear more.
Yes, but as opposed to Liza Lapira taking over Disgust.
For Mindy Kaling. Yes. Yeah, which honestly, like, if nobody had told me, I wouldn't have even registered the change.
Yeah, that Disgust was pretty spot on. I will say, like, that said, like, even the other 3 main emotions, Amy Poehler for joy, Phyllis Smith for sadness, and Lewis Black for anger, like, they all sounded different too.
Oh, sure.
Because I mean, it's been like almost a decade since the first one.
Right.
So like all of those actors and actresses are just older themselves, and their voices have changed a little bit.
Right.
But like, it honestly, like, it's okay because it's a movie about being older.
Right.
And like during puberty, your voice does change.
Yes,
so, like,
yes.
It was like, this is sort of like a happy accident that's working out perfect.
Ever so slightly on the old nose. But yeah, so that's kind of fun. We get like a little bit of like an update from Joy as to like what's going on with Riley. Like she's a bad cook.
She's still amazing.
Yeah. She's like, a top student. What else does she have going on? Oh, she outgrows her like rainbow shirt.
Oh, I loved that scene because it's like they show you her trying to put on the shirt from the first movie, and she's clearly like outgrown it.
Right.
But like it's such like a visual metaphor for what the movie will be about, because in the first movie, that shirt represents like all of Riley's emotions.
Right.
And like when she's happy, it's on full display. But as the movie goes on, she like slowly puts on this like black hoodie, and then she like zips it up, and then she's got the hood up, and like you can't see them anymore. They're all blacked out.
Right.
So it's like this movie is about her like, I don't know, outgrowing her old emotions, which not entirely. Obviously, you need all of them.
Well, I think it's a great way to say it. Like I loved exactly where you're going with that, because I even feel like a piece of like what's happening inside of this movie is the conversation between each of the emotions who all want their influence felt on Riley. But like one of the key plot points, if we just zoom like literally to the end, is that like we can't tell Riley like who she is supposed to be. Like,
yeah.
And that I think is where like as a small child, in a lot of ways, you are your emotions.
Right.
You know, it's if you are happy, you are happy. If you are sad, you are sad. And you feel things in a very singular capacity. And that is very much how we left the first Inside Out, was almost this idea that like, okay, now what we're seeing is like memories can be multicolored. Like this is both joy and sad at the same time. And so sure enough, all of Riley's memories feature these particular things. But I feel like that establishment of the sense of self is almost like we all have emotions. We all share those. Those are universal. They live inside of all of us. We are all capable of all of them. But your experiences are what shape who you are as a person.
Yes.
And I think that sort of like almost even seemed like kind of sort of what they were telling us about that sense of self. It's like we might, because I think the example they give is the one of her close friends before they had become friends is doing a presentation before the class, and she's like, the change in your couch can make a difference, and then she drops the change on the floor, and I think Disgust responds by being like, oh no, we can't help her, that's like social like downfall,
social suicide.
Yeah, exactly, like it's like that's not going to be okay. But then it's almost like it doesn't matter what the emotions think in that moment, because Riley's sense of self overrides everything.
Right.
And so it's not that she's outgrowing her emotions necessarily, like she won't need or have use for them, but it's like Riley is now also becoming more in control of her emotions.
Yeah, which is really where the movie's going towards the end, where it's like she can sort of like summon joy to the front almost.
Yes, exactly. Which like very much chills.
I know, it's like,
it's like, jeez. Like when you see Joy there at the end, and like all the like yellow like little like bubbly spots are like pulling her forward, it's like
I know. It's like oh, the emotions don't get to choose who she is, and it's like that means my emotions don't control me. That's what they're saying.
I know.
I can control my emotions. Which is like, even that, it's like, can I control anxiety? It's like, can I?
I know. Yeah. That's a big question. Like that, even a piece of me getting out of the theater, I'm sort of like, I really want to think that all my emotions in my brain created that nice, comfortable chair for anxiety to hang out in.
I know,
and it's sort of like, you're good. Like,
I also loved it when her friend like spills the tea, and it literally makes her spill the tea.
Yes,
like,
I know.
Gossip and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it's so good.
But on the same note of her not being able to fit into the old shirt, in this movie, the clothes she's wearing most of the time is just her hockey gear, which is conveniently colored orange and teal, which then matches like envy and anxiety who are sort of like the two main drivers of this movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No accident there, let me tell you.
Anyway, so as we continue, because we're in the first like 6 minutes of the movie so far, I do think there's the amazing thread the needle moment, like where they make the play, and like Riley like takes the end of her stick and sort of like pulls the puck between the player, and like her friend makes the slap shot, and it's like boom,
boom. Yeah, that's awesome.
This of course gets the attention of Coach Roberts from the high school, who has been watching, and invites them to a skills camp that is starting tomorrow, which is like one of those things where I'm sort of like tomorrow. Not the end of the summer, not like, tomorrow. Okay.
Right.
Yep. So a 3-day overnight skills camp where she would potentially be putting her skills on display for the first time for the high school team, which are the Firehawks.
The Firehawks, yeah.
Then it's kind of interesting because you kind of get like the moment because we don't get many moments with mom and dad in this movie.
Not really, yeah. Mom and dad play a much like more of a backseat role in this one. They're only there at the beginning and the end.
Yes. But you do kind of get like the intro to this sort of like puberty stage of Riley's life, which largely seems to happen after the game we open with and before she leaves for camp.
Yeah, literally overnight.
The next morning.
Yeah.
Like it's basically like, okay, now we're in full force. Like
Everything's
the
here.
Yeah.
But like I love how the moment the alarm goes off, the demo team shows up, they just sort of wreck everything and then just like leave.
Yes.
It's like they just like it's such clever visual storytelling where it's like, what happened? It's like puberty left your mind in shambles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know exactly. And it's really funny too because I think Joy is like she has created this little special vacuum tube where she can take all of the things that she doesn't really want to like store in long-term memory or whatever, or be part of Riley's like sense of self, like, you know, existing that stream of consciousness beneath. So then in the middle of the night, like they hear the alarm going off, they're all freaking out, and Joy grabs the puberty, however it's depicted, throws it in the thing and shoots it off into the back of the mind or whatever.
Right.
Which, like, even that I kind of felt like was symbolic of the way that, like when I'm going through these years of my life, like, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever, like early adolescent years and stuff, like, we're all going through this. We're all struggling with it together. No one is talking about it even at all.
Even at all, yes. Like, I remember it's like in health class, they're like, so puberty, this is what's gonna happen during that time. And like while it's happening, you're like, even though you knew it was coming, even though it had a name, even though all the things they told you were gonna happen, you're not like, yeah, I'm going through puberty right now.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's like the fact that it gets like lobbed to the back of the mind, I was even like, that even feels on point for this particular thing. Like
it does.
At no point going through those stages of my life could I have rationalized like, okay, Ben, you're just going through something right now. You're mentally changing. I mean, that would probably be a lot of maturity for like a 14-year-old to have that awareness and everything, because you're just existing.
Yeah.
You've always been existing, and now all of a sudden things are chaos.
Exactly.
But yeah, I like the little sign. It said, "Pardon our dust. Puberty is messy."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So sure enough, though, Riley wakes up the next morning, and each of the emotions is going up and like trying to like touch a button. And it's sort of like they're like, I just touched it. Like I barely touched it.
Yeah.
And like Riley's going off and everything. And you're like,
yeah. That does seem like how it is. Yep.
I remember that.
Ooh, fun. This is just like a little like sort of Easter eggs. There's like two little Easter eggs happening in this scene as well. One is that the shirt Riley's sleeping in is for the Brang app, which is the dad's app that they moved to San Francisco for.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a nice little continuity thing. And then on her wall, I don't know if you noticed, there's a Four Town poster.
Oh, is there really? From Turning Red?
Yeah,
Nice.
I was like, oh, yes.
That's so perfect.
That's fantastic. So
That's
good for
pretty
Riley, all
yeah.
into the boy bands.
Well, although that's kind of interesting too, because I feel like she would be into a boy band from like 15 years prior.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that taking place like at like 2003 range or something?
Yeah. I guess when is this one taking place?
I thought it was closer to like the present.
More like the present, yeah.
2016, 2018.
So, because I think the first one takes place in the year it came out, which is like 2016.
Yeah.
So this one's like 2018, I guess.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, how about that? Good for them.
Yeah. What do you know? Didn't have to
worry.
address that at all.
Nothing's going to go wrong. It'll be fine.
It's a whole different universe.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. They probably didn't have COVID there. Lucky them.
Hopefully.
Lucky them.
Okay, so then anyway, we are making our way to camp, where we first get introduced to Valentino Ortiz, who is going to be the captain of the Firehawks. Apparently, she's someone super cool and a senior in high school, and she made the team as a freshman.
Freshman, just like Riley wants to do. She wants to be just like Val Ortiz.
Yes, but as they're having the conversation, there's the discussion basically between Riley's close friends, whose names I wish I could remember.
Grace and... Riley's other friend.
Grace and Riley's other friend. I thought I had it.
I have it written down here?
Grace and Bree. Grace and Bree.
Yes,
Yep,
Bree.
there we go. We got it. Okay. There's a conversation happening between Riley, Grace, and Bree, and they're basically all like, Riley's all excited about the prospect of like, what if we're all on the same team next year? When Grace and Bree are going to sort of break it to her that they are unfortunately going to be going to a different school, which I thought was a really, really good selection for what is triggering like the whole plot of the story to unfold. Because a lot of like what Riley's trauma up until this moment has been is her move from Minnesota to San Francisco and the loss of all of her friends and some of the attached jealousy to witnessing her old team still interact, her old friends make new friends. And like, that's something she's sort of like, we didn't really get to see her fully overcome that arc in the first movie.
Right, we just sort of know that she has.
Exactly.
Yeah, and now here she is with new friends. Everything's great. They're playing hockey again.
Right.
But now they have to leave.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe that, like, you know, it seems like it's sort of forced because, like, I guess the end of their hockey season must be happening, like, in the, like, what, at the beginning of the summer or something? Weirdly.
It must be, yeah.
Yeah, because they're like going to this camp and then it'll be summer and then school will start.
Right.
So it's like, maybe it's sort of like forcing them to tell her right now. It seems weird that both of them, I guess that they're not moving. It's just sort of like the lines have been redrawn.
Yeah, we went through a little bit of this where we grew up too. Like where sometimes like they're like rerouting it and it's like people across the street go to a different school from you all of a sudden. It's just like, well, no, darn it.
Wait, what? Yeah.
I knew them.
Right.
But I love, there was one moment in particular that like was something I felt like I've experienced, which is when like Riley hears them say something like hedge just a little bit and then disgust like pulls up like the secret agent thing like, and she's like, oh no, zoom in, enhance, like whatever.
What was that?
You know, it's like, see that?
Her
like
then,
that.
her then, her now.
Right, yes, yeah. I was like, that I think is so often how my own brain is working inside of conversations. It's like I'm like watching people, I'm like watching these like little micro expressions and I'm like, wait a second, what was that? What just happened? Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe disgust up in my brain is like
working overtime. Yeah, you got a good like disgust emotion.
Apparently, more so than I would have thought. I never would have been like, yes, disgust is the person at the lead of my helm.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, she finds out that particular piece of information, which certainly is going to like, you know, make her kind of sad going into this journey because it might be like the last time they're playing on the same team together. They arrive at camp where
like maybe not, you know, like whatever Foghorn team they're on is certainly like some sort of city league. It's not like their school that they're playing for.
You know, that's a good point. Yeah, it's like, what was the Foghorns like the middle school team, or is that like travel or rec?
Right, it seems like some sort of travel team, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like some sort of year-round hockey, especially if you're playing it in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, for plot reasons, it seems as though Riley she's not able to
only, not like, because yeah, you're right, they're not even moving. So, which means wherever they live, they'll still just live there.
Right,
like,
yes.
It's like, but no, we're not friends anymore, basically.
Right.
But her friends obviously don't see it that way. They're like, this sucks. We're not going to be at the same school, but like friends forever, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So. But I mean, it's still difficult, like especially if like that's a foundation for how your friendship fits together.
I did also like that when they're looking at the Islands of Personality, which they scaled back down to like the core 5 from the first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but they're like, where's Family Island? And it's like so tiny all of a sudden.
I know.
And I was like, that do be what it's like for a while, isn't it?
Dude, I mean, I'm sure you would relate as well, but like being the parent of a small child, that thought of like that little island becoming so little, it's like,
no.
Don't forget about me.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, so Riley and friends, Grace and Bree, make it to camp where they immediately run into Val.
Or Riley does.
Riley does, yes. And I this is kind of like a funny moment. I think Joy says, "Everyone be regular." I don't know, that was just like a really funny way of phrasing that. Then this is like the first moment where the console becomes orange.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've got to say, like, we saw this a little bit in the first movie, and if there was anything about Inside Out that I ever felt like was like harder to feel like that's how your emotions work, I think in the original Inside Out, there's a scene where like Riley's disappointed about something, and then Joy has like an idea like to slide down the pole or whatever, like slide down like the
I have an idea.
Yeah. And like Riley's like, I'm gonna do it. And then like I think the idea like pops out and she's like, oh, maybe I won't. And she's like, I will again. And it's like, okay, that kind of like emotion, that to me felt like a little bit more intense. And in this original exchange with Val, the same thing is happening, but with some of the newer emotions where anxiety is like sort of like super hyper intense, very like, oh my gosh, like all this stuff is happening and like how I don't know how to be, and now I'm embarrassed, and you know, so then I think Ennui comes out and is sort of like, whatever, like sure, cool. Anyway, the point is that Riley's delivery here, I'm like, that was not the world's greatest impression. Val is a senior in high school. She is an up-and-coming freshman. I'm sort of surprised that based on how this exchange goes, that Val is so interested in being Riley's like kind of friend. Like the fact that she keeps insisting on like inviting Riley to stuff for like the rest of the movie, I'm like, Riley's not batting 1,000.
Not batting 1,000, seems like.
Not to fault her, I'm just surprised that the senior is like so determined to take this freshman under her wing.
It does. I mean, I think they say something like, that's the one coach has been telling us about or something.
Right.
Like maybe they've heard something about her, or like maybe it's like part of the understood rules of the camp that the seniors will be like welcoming to the freshmen or something.
Trying to like take them under their wing.
You know, it feels like maybe something was said behind closed doors that we just didn't get to see about that. But yeah, I agree. I was like, you are going, you know what? I never felt like the seniors are going out of their way to buddy up with me.
Yes, I feel like my experience with sports as a freshman was you are lowest man on the totem pole, which means you get to carry the water bucket.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, cool, yay, that's fun. So then when I was a senior, I carried the water bucket because I wanted to be the change you want to see in the world. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So then, we get introduced to all the various other emotions. Yeah, so we've got envy, embarrassment, ennui. Am I missing somebody? Envy, embarrassment, ennui. Anxiety, of course. Yeah, okay. The big one. The main one.
Yeah.
All of them I thought were kind of hilarious. I liked the way that ennui had like the little like handheld. Yeah, it was like, of course.
That was good. And it was like, it wasn't just that like they gave that to him. It was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if ennui like has an app or something like that comes into play later too?
Yeah, even that. But the way it's set up, I feel like it fits that character so well that it doesn't just feel like a plant.
Yeah.
Just to be like, how are we gonna solve that? It's like, okay. Let's back up a little bit. What if we have a character who's kind of nonchalant? You know, it's like, it doesn't really feel that way. It's like, it seems like that completely fits in. And it's like one of the most classic teenage behaviors is that like ennui, sort of like cooler than everything,
too good for that.
I don't even know if it's a word. I call it lackadaisical.
Lackadaisical? That sounds like a word.
Is it a word?
Yeah.
If it is a word, then why not? Yeah.
You know what? You know what it means.
You know what it means.
Got it. You got the gist of it.
Yeah, it's one of those words that means what it sounds like.
It sounds like
what it means.
Like bam!
Okay, so then what happens?
So we go into the locker room. Joy keeps trying to like force the controls, and it starts like backfiring a little bit because now they're like goofing off instead of the coach or listening to them.
Yes.
So it's starting to look like it's like it's trying to set you up for like, yeah, joy's not always the answer. Sometimes anxiety will be helpful. See, look at this.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's definitely what's going on. Is that like, in this moment, like she walks in and the older teammates are like, why don't you come sit with us? And then she's like, nah, I got to go sit with my friends. And like that's the old guard winning out. And then she goes and sits with her friends and she's being Joy. And so she's like goofing off. And the coach walks in and she's like, yo, Anderson, not cool. Everybody's phones in this bucket. Yeah. Which is one of those things where I was like, you had the bucket right there. Were you always planning to take everyone's phones?
It's exactly. Well, one, always going to take the phones. Two, always like, no matter what, someone was getting called out and they were going to go do lines immediately.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like that's what was going on. It's like the coach is like going to walk in and like set the mood,
set the tone
for camp. Like, Riley ended up being the fall man for it.
Yes.
But like someone was going to make them do lines.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because that's the thing too, is that like just yesterday, this coach like has clearly hand selected these trio,
three, y'all are good.
Right. So maybe it's even like you got to focus in on them to be like, okay, we're not in like rec league anymore. This is big kid league.
This is the big league, y'all.
So anyway, then she ends up being sort of like the target of some animosity from some of the other players, being like, well, that Michigan girl, because I keep thinking she's from Michigan.
They can't correct it.
Yes.
That's where we're from now.
That's so relatable as well. Yeah. It's like if somebody like hears your name wrong, it's like, I can't fix this.
Yep.
I can't fix it. I'll be Dan. Why not?
Sure, that's me from now on.
Yeah, I'm just Dan.
There was a guy on our cross country team who we just started calling Dave because his real name was John, but there was like 4 other Johns, and it was like, we got too many, man. You're Dave now. And like that ended up being like on his hoodie.
Yes.
It was just like, like other people outside the team just started calling him Dave.
It was just, it was like, you mean Dave? Yeah. And I was like, hold on. I forgot we're not at practice. Him?
You know him as Dave?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah. It carried over.
Yeah.
It'd be so funny if we met him today. It's like, what up, I'm Dave. He'd be like, you're kidding.
No.
It's stuck.
Wow.
Riley's just from Michigan now.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. So
what I thought was very interesting is that like you have Riley's like sense of self, like her established sense of self, like the I am a good person thing, and anxiety comes in and it's just like, it's like, Joy's like, look, this is not what we do. This is our sense of self. And anxiety is like, oh, you're right. This isn't going to work. If that's the case, see ya.
Yeah. It just plucks that right out, sends it to the back of the mind.
Yeah. But like, it's so, I think this is another like clever visual thing they do, because the way the sense of self is working is that it kind of looks like a flower or something.
Yes.
Rooting up. And it's like what happens is anxiety shows up and uproots the sense of self. And it's like, yep, that's it. Yeah, okay, I see what you're going for. Anxiety uproots your sense of self. That feels right. That sentence makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was another one where I was just like, oof, like that is very severe, because I do think like in life when my anxiety is winning, it's like that, I think, are the moments where you're like, your interest in all the things that used to be fun to you feel like they're not fun in the same way anymore. And like,
it's like you remember them in the back of your mind as things you were interested in, but...
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's like, but I can't bring them back to the forefront. I can't summon the interest that I know used to be there. And you lament it not being there, but it doesn't change anything. It's like, why am I not compelled to do this activity that I love anymore? And it's like that's what's happening. Anxiety is winning there. And again, this is what I love about these movies so much, is that I feel like this is the dialogue that I feel like you can use as like the working visual example to like help people recognize that's what's happening.
Right.
You know, and that there is help that can be had for this exact thing.
Yes.
So, anyway, but yeah, so then anxiety's whole thing there is basically like, you know, again, it's something that I feel like I've experienced, which is that like, well, I'm just going to build a whole new sense of self around anxiety.
Yeah. This will be me now.
This is who I am. Right. I am anxiety.
Yes. But that's like also where like the stream of consciousness then starts like, that was like a helpful way to look at it too. It's like, yeah, that's how it is now, but like if more memories come in, you can replace all those anxiety memories, you know?
Right. Yes.
They don't have to control you forever.
Right. Yes, exactly. Like because it is like a rotating cast of what's flowing through.
Yeah. But so like what I thought what was interesting for Joy's character here is like at the start of the movie, you get to see her exhibit all of the character growth from the first movie, where like they get out of the car and she's like, sadness now, and it's like, you know, she makes Riley cry, like, you know, right there on the front steps.
Right.
And Joy's like, it's okay, we need this. And you're like, Inside Out 1, Joy never would have done that.
Yes.
You know, we didn't need sadness at all. But then like upon being ousted from headquarters, Joy like reverts back to Inside Out 1 Joy, where she's like, everything must be positive. Look at the bright side of everything all the time. Always, always, always.
Right. We got to take the long way. I love the long way. Good for the hammies.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like she sort of like has a bit of a regression there. However, there is I think part of why they do this, because I sort of felt like Joy's just sort of going on the same journey again, but not entirely, because there's a moment where they send Sadness to like kind of climb through the tube to try and get back to headquarters, and then like she's left with fear, disgust, and anger again. And it reminded me of a scene in the first movie where like Riley's in the sleeping bag in her room with no furniture, and you know, like they're like, no, Joy, there's no reason for Riley to be happy right now. Let us handle this.
Right.
Or whatever. And then the mom comes in and it's like, the movie might have been solved right there.
Right.
They just let her feel the other emotions. But it was like, there's a moment where those three like are kind of have the same moment with her, and like, you know, Joy like breaks down and she's like, of course I'm feeling crazy.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It's like she like kind of listens to them a little bit more this time around rather than not.
Yeah.
But then they help her.
Right, right, yes, exactly. Like,
that's all coming, because she like cries and then they come and help her, which is what happens in the first one.
There you go. There you go.
Man,
it's all coming together.
Crazy. I mean, I was just putting it all together right now. I was like, oh, that's really good.
Yep.
It's pretty good.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, cool. We're good.
No, I love that moment though with Joy, and I'm trying to find it in my notes here really quick, because I do think like even Joy sort of like reaching that breaking point of being like I can't be happy all the time. Like, do you know how hard that is?
Yeah.
Like, it's like that's sort of like a little singularity where it's like you could almost like go inside of like Joy's mind and see like different colored little emotions running around. And there's like the hyper Joy that is like the Joy that runs Joy, but then Joy's also got like her own like little like red anger version of herself.
Right.
That's just sort of like, I'm tired, okay?
I'm tired.
You know, like, you can't do this all the time.
This is hard.
Yeah, so it's like watching her as in like just a raw emotion also just like reach that breaking point, like is relatable. But we also witnessed like the other emotions, I think, sort of go through similar things as well. Like anger at one point in time, while they're inside of like the imagination like cushion fort or pillow fort.
Yes.
There's like a moment where they're trying to like send all the ideas up to anxiety, which is kind of
that was such a good representation too.
Yes. Yeah. Like there's a situation where I think anger is like, we could give flowers to the losing team or something like that, and like slides it up, and he's like, what? I can't be angry all the time.
Right.
You know,
and I was like, well, but can't you? Isn't that how you're supposed to be?
Right.
Like, and I'm like trying to think like what that means. Like your anger can't be angry all the time.
Well, I think that like what that is it, to me at least, it almost feels like there's like subtler shades that are being formed around it. Like anger is not always like the raw anger. Like, I mean, I'm like raising a toddler, so like I feel like I witnessed this a lot, where it's like you watch anger take the wheel in my daughter Addison, and it's like what she's experiencing in this moment is pure anger, like all the way. Like, and she doesn't feel it, you know, it's a sliding scale though.
Right.
You know, so I think.
Right. I guess, yeah, I'm like working through it. It's like anger doesn't always mean mad necessarily. Or like even in that scenario, it's like anger could be like watching what anxiety is doing and be like, yes, I'm mad about it. Here's what I'm doing to help.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But it's like, it's not an angry resolution.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
But I am angry about it.
Think
Yeah.
I can see it.
But dude, I loved the whole like anxiety is like taking over imagination land, is like turning Riley's imagination against her. It was like, oh boy, that does feel like how it goes sometimes. Like,
dude,
send me projections. What things can go wrong?
That was another like too real moment for me, where I was like, like when I lie in bed at night and can't sleep, it's like that is what's happening. That's what's happening to Riley inside of that moment. Is she's pulling scenarios up in her head, and it was even funny to me because even Joy being down there and like attempting to like override what anxiety was doing, even that, I think, like before a big race, like when I was like in high school, like running cross country or whatever, like I would have like thoughts rolling through my head. It's like, you know, what if I get out there? What if I can't finish? What if I have to walk? What if I pass out on the course? So like, you know, like what are all these terrible scenarios? What if I lose my spot on varsity? Like, you know, all this bad thing. And then like randomly inside of this surge of thoughts, I'd be like, what if I win? You know, and it was just like, you know, and then like sometimes I think even this is exactly like what Joy does, where it's like, what if we win and then we make the team and then we become captain, then we win states, then we go to the Olympics, and then we change like the world. And I think even that is something that like I think is like gone through your brain, where it's like, what if I win tomorrow? What if I find a whole new confidence? What if I become amazing at this? What if I get a scholarship to college? Like, you know, it's like you just went from like worrying about losing your spot to like.
The movie did a good job of being like they all set up like these other like happier projections, and it was like, okay, yeah, that's good. That was good. That was real, you know, something you could do, something that might actually happen. And then it was like anxiety was like sending all these things, and it was like, those things can't really happen. A lot of those things aren't going to happen. Like you're worrying about things that won't happen. But then Joy, you're right, did the same thing. It was like, or maybe we change the entire world and we make the Olympics, and that's great. And it was just like, that was also pretty unrealistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was like, I liked the way they did those sort of things, where it was like, Joy is like, she is trying her best to help, but it's like, that actually wasn't helpful. Or there was like another scene where like she's like telling everyone their plan, and like I thought this was so God, they just did such a good job of explaining like common emotional conversations. Where I was like, well, I'll just get back to headquarters and then I'll talk to anxiety and be like, anxiety, you worry too much. Have you tried not worrying? And then she'd be like, no, Joy, I haven't thought about that. That was a great idea. Thank you. And everything will be better. And it was like you're watching Joy do this and she's trying to help. And in her mind, this plan is great. And you, the audience, are watching it, and it's so obvious that this is a terrible plan. That's not how it works. But then like in your real life, like you fall victim to that line of thinking all the time.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's like, you know, if you're traveling with somebody who has travel anxiety, it's like, you know, you can be out there and be like, I'm completely fine, but this person is very worried. And it's like, is there any chance maybe you could just worry less? And it's like, no.
Right.
Like they can't worry less.
They can't.
Like, it's not that they want to be worried.
Right.
It's like
have you tried not worrying? It's like, of course.
Right. Yes. Like, do you think I'm enjoying this?
Yeah.
Like, this is no cheat.
I just that was really good, because it was just like, I've had that conversation. I've had that thought process before.
Yes, indeed.
And it's like, it's so easy. It's like, it feels like when it's easy to forget. It's like yeah, you just stop worrying about it. It's not really a big deal. Well, I don't understand why you can't see it's not a big deal.
Right.
Like, because I cannot see that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, and on that exact same note, there's a couple of other like big situations that I think are happening on Riley's end of the equation, where she is now like in full anxiety mode, like attempting to forge this like friendship and relationship and be perceived as like very cool amongst like the older players. So she's like, eating the granola bar that tastes terrible, and then like later that night she's sitting on the couch talking about how she doesn't like Get Up and Glow anymore.
Oh my gosh, when she's talking about that, one, also highly relatable, where you're like suddenly changing your opinions based on like social pressure.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think everyone has that moment.
Yeah.
And like Ennui shows up and he's like, I've been with you my whole life for this moment.
Yes.
Creates the sarcasm. And I was like, whoever at Pixar thought of the sarcasm like deserves a gold medal, because that is the funniest thing I've seen all year.
It was so great. It was so great. Although I even felt like in the movie the people were like, sarcasm. Really?
Yeah.
Like they were almost like the emotions were aware of the pun that was being used. And we're like, oh, come on.
Yeah. But I love when they're yelling across it, like it's just like affecting their voice.
Yes.
And like, you guys are so helpful.
Right. What's wrong with those guys?
You guys are jerks. Yeah, I thought that was super good. Sarcasm, big thumbs up. But then she's eating the I thought this was like another good use of the stream of consciousness, is like when she's like eating the protein bar and like her stream of consciousness is suddenly filled with like food.
Yes.
And stuff. And it was like, that is such a funny teenager thing. Like, what are you thinking about? It's like, food. I'm thinking about food. I'm hungry again. I'm always hungry.
Always hungry. Yeah. So I'm thinking about, but then when she's eating the granola bar, the foods are like asparagus. There's like a box of cardboard. It's like classic, like, yum. This energy bar tastes like nothing.
The broccoli. That was like, it's a fun callback to the first one. I was like, is that broccoli? I can't, guys. I can't.
Yeah. I'm not doing it.
I can't do it.
So then inside of this evening, like where all the girls are hanging out and they've like ordered food or whatever, and Riley's friends come over, and there's sort of that moment where they're like, no, you love Get Up and Glow. We just went to the concert. Like even that moment is like you're being caught between two worlds.
Yes.
In this very like I think in that moment, like, because I think I experienced that too, and you're right, like it's something where it's like you're like willing to like give up your own interest for the sake of like being liked or whatever.
Yeah.
But because in those moments, it's like I could easily not like this thing that I've loved. Like if that means social acceptance, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll give it up right now.
Yeah, we love Get Up and Glow.
Right. But then it is so difficult because it's like you did just have fun with it, but this is also something you want, and it's like
like am I about to be like, am I not going to be accepted by this group because of this one thing I like,
Exactly.
But it's like even in that moment, like before, like the first reaction from Val, who is just must be the nicest senior of all time.
I know,
like,
truly.
Get Up and Glow, I love those guys. And then the other teammate's like, yeah, when I was like 13, not now, right, Riley?
Right. It's like, how old are you?
Yeah,
13.
Right.
Yeah. But then they introduce this concept of the big game tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which is going to basically be like, apparently like this is like laying the groundwork for like apparently Val during this exact same game 4 years prior. This is like when she got Coach Roberts full attention. And I think at this point in time, they've already made reference to the fact that there's like the notebook that has like all the information about everything that Coach Roberts has like found about each of the players. And so like that's sort of like this looming like what's gonna come of that,
right?
But you can understand the pressure. Like this is like what I feel like kids must feel do feel around like the SATs. It's like you can't help but feel like this one Saturday morning, like when you're a junior in high school, you are going to get up in your bed and you are going to go and take a test, and that test is going to have such ramifications about how the rest of your world is going to play out.
This could be the difference between I get into this college or this college. And if I don't get into that college and I have to go to this one, then my opportunities will be that much less or that much greater.
Right,
or
exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah. So it's like this will either go extremely well or extremely badly, and like so you can
and nothing else can change it at all.
Right. That's not true. Things can change it. There's other stuff happening.
I know. It's like it's like anxiety, but that is how like anxiety talks. It's like, well, if Val did it, then that means we have to get 3 goals too, or else that's the end of our life, basically. So So these are the rules, and I'm going to abide by. We're going to get 3.
Exactly.
And like so, like this is another like parallel to the first movie where it's like, yep, there's like a big or in the first movie, Anger gets the idea to like return to Minnesota, and they put that in, and it's like then like that's what sets like the end of the movie in motion. And it's like same thing. Anxiety's looking for a big idea, and they get to see the brainstorm, which I thought was very funny.
I thought the brainstorm was really funny, and another one that I thought was totally relatable, where if I'm trying to crack a problem and I'm pacing back and forth in my room, I'm coming up with a whole bunch of really bad ideas.
Yeah.
On my way to like what might be like a reasonably okay one.
Yeah.
But in this case, her big idea is there a big idea to go and dye her hair?
Is it?
I
Or is
mean-
it to go steal the notebook?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you just saw it. I was thinking it was to steal the notebook, but that.
Yeah, I wrote down big idea is dye her hair, and it was sort of like, was that big of an idea?
Yeah.
You're using like Kool-Aid.
I mean, it's like a little presumptuous, I suppose.
It
like
is.
if you're the varsity team and you've worked hard to get there and you've all dyed your hair as like a thing, and like this freshman comes in who's not on the team and they're like, yeah, I'm part of you guys, right? Look what I did.
It does feel like that's one where I can almost go more into senior brain and be like, you might be jumping the gun like just a scooch.
Yeah.
You know, but either way, apparently this
Of
is
course, Val's cool with it.
Of course,
she's the best senior ever.
Yeah, precisely. Like
Yeah.
that was like the thing I kept trying to like resist the whole time. Is I was like, there's no like weird shot that like Val like was like, I don't know, liked Riley or something, because that felt
Right, yeah.
that was like that's too far.
I don't think they're doing that.
Yeah.
I did on that note. I did love Mount Crushmore.
No, yeah, you're right.
that was so funny.
Yeah.
Where they had the guy from Riley's First Date in there, and then like the video game character.
Yes. The video game character was up. That was another reference. I was like, do I get this? Like I thought it was hilarious. Like when he like tried to like walk through the wall and
Yes.
like doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But then the signature move of being like the roll.
Yeah.
Is that a reference to something?
That was when I was like, I feel like it is. It's got to be talking about something that I do not get.
Okay.
I didn't know exactly the reference there either, but it was funny.
Yeah.
And then I thought the whole like, oh, that's Bluefy. It's like Riley still likes Bluefy, and that's like her dark secret, or like not her dark secret.
But it's like
But
deep
it's-
in the vault.
But it's like it's in the vault. Yeah, it's like you get the feeling like Get Up and Glow are on their way back there.
Yes,
you know, right?
yeah. Like any minute now, they're getting sent to the vault. The vault, by the way, is where we can spot A113.
A113, spelled out in Roman numerals, ACX111.
Yes. That was a good one.
Yeah,
It's
that
kinda
was
like,
a very
okay.
clever A113. Yeah, I love the idea of the vault though. That was very fun. I thought Bluefy was very fun, like a little Blue's Clues reference there.
Yes.
I love when it's like it's like sort of breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience, but then they show you Bluefy from the other character's perspective.
And he's just talking to a wall. It's like at that moment you're like, this character's a little manic.
Yeah.
A little intense.
Yeah.
But I love that Pouchy made like a little comeback.
Yeah, a little comeback. It's like, or a stick of dynamite.
Give me that. I tried to give you the tape. I tried to give you the rubber duck.
Yeah. Why do you have so much dynamite, Pouchy?
Oh man, but yeah. So then we finally do make it to the final game. I guess thanks to Pouchy, they're able to find a way to like start working their way back to headquarters by basically blowing up the stream of consciousness like dam.
I guess they like break the cliff that's holding all the bad memories from the back of the mind, and that like creates a stream of bad memories that floods the stream of consciousness, and they ride their way into the belief system where they can take the elevator back up to HQ.
Yeah, okay, here's a quick question on that note then. Because when you find the giant mountain of like back of the mind memories, Joy makes a comment where she's like, I don't remember setting this much back here.
Yeah.
And we watch her at the beginning of the movie like pull down her special like, you know, tunnel tube like attachment thing or whatever. And we watch them send back like a handful.
Yeah.
Like a dozen maybe or something. And you get back there and there's easily thousands, tens of thousands or something.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, is that something where it's almost like Riley herself has been like sending those back there?
I don't know. It's sort of weird because it seemed like Joy is like telling you, the audience, about like her memory shooter thing.
Right.
But like the way she does it, or the way they wrote it, made it sound like, look what I just invented right now, right here.
Right.
But then immediately she's like, all right, let's clear them out. And all the other emotions know exactly what to do, which make it seem like they have been doing it for a while.
So maybe it is more just like, hey, as long as we're getting caught up, this is everybody who we know inside of the mind. This is a cool new thing I invented, blah, blah, blah. We send these things back there. And I actually, you know what? I think that's more the case because what's really happening throughout the whole story is that you're pulling for Joy and you're sort of like, she's kind of like it feels like the protagonist, I guess, like the one who's like attempting to like fix things especially versus Anxiety.
Yeah. Who you walking into the movie actively hate.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah, I mean, and it's not hard to hate the concept of anxiety because we all hate the concept of anxiety. But I think a huge piece of what you're witnessing there is that they are both attempting to determine, like, it's that phrase, you don't get to choose who Riley is like what Joy ultimately says. But she says that because she's realizing that's what I've been doing. Right. I have been trying to choose.
Right.
Who
I've
Riley
been sending
is.
all these memories to the back. And
that,
like the new sense of self is that like it's like you are not just the good things that happen to you. You are everything that happens to you.
Right. Yeah. Yes, you are indeed. We are complex beings. Right. And it's like we are not without our faults. We are not without our strengths, but like we are everything.
Yeah.
All at once. And this is all sort of happening during what I genuinely would mark as what I think is like maybe one of the best sequences in all of Pixar. Yeah. Which is, Riley's inside of the game. She is clearly just like, anxiety has gone in such overdrive that she is like stealing the puck from like her own teammates. Yeah. Like she's playing extremely aggressively, but she's making goals. And then she, of course, runs into one of her friends.
Grace.
Yeah. So she just like flies into Grace. And like, this is sort of like that moment where I think she kind of like snaps, like, I don't know if she snaps out of it, but like snaps into it a little bit where it's like, oh geez, and everything.
Yeah. It's like, as much as anxiety might have been helping her score to that point, this has clearly gone over the line. Yes. But like anxiety doesn't know what to do. So she just goes harder.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But the sequence where she is like sitting inside of that penalty box and like having the anxiety attack and like you're witnessing it like really up close to her face and like the sweat kind of coming off of her and like
like one of trouble breathing and like the tornado of thoughts going around.
I was just like, man, they are just, I mean, it's hard to watch, but it's like I think that is like what demonstrates the execution because it's like you can feel what she's feeling.
Yeah,
like, and if you've had those feelings before, it's like
that's what it feels like. I mean, anxiety is like your brain is going so fast. Yeah. And it's just like you cannot focus on anything in front of you at all. It's just like the next thing is coming and coming and coming and coming. And it's like, it's just like the cyclone up there.
It is, yeah. And so it's almost kind of eerie too, like when Joy like is able to like burn her way into like the vortex and like anxiety is almost like it reminds me of like the glitch or something from Wreck-It Ralph, where it's almost like anxiety is like become like frozen. Yeah. It's almost as if like not really there, not really the vortex, not really like anything.
It's not really being helpful anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. Not even in control of itself.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is, of course, when they finally realize that they don't need to return Riley's old sense of self or leave in Anxiety's sense of self, but allow all of those memories and experiences that have been backlogged for so long to come and allow their influence and to all come together and merge into what is Riley's new sense of self, which is this ever-changing, ever-evolving, like version. It's not that static flower.
It's like moment to moment.
Precisely. Yeah. And I do think that is like, when you think about your true sense of self, that is what's happening. It's like, this is why we have ups and downs. This is why we have ebbs and flows. We have good days, bad days, like moments when we're excited, moments when we're sad, moments when we're angry, but like not necessarily just those emotions at the wheel. It's more of like the amalgamation of all those experiences into your being.
Right.
So, anyway, I thought like all of that demonstration, all of those visuals, like the way that everything about the movie played out, I just think it's a benefit to society in addition to being entertaining. It's like, I truly think it will make a difference. And it all sort of culminates with that really like chills moment. Yeah. Like where Joy is standing there and like, you can see like this sort of like pull coming off of her, and that is Riley basically saying like, Joy, I need you. Right. And then you get to see Riley just like skate effortlessly and be in the moment and just enjoy doing the thing. Right. That she loves.
I suppose it ends on like an ambiguous note, like does she make the team or not? Like she gets the phone call and smiles. So you just sort of assume she makes it.
I know, yeah. There was a tiny little ounce of heavy-handedness of the like, it's like, you know what? If you don't make the team, that's okay too. I know it. It's like yeah, we know. But you're right. That does sort of leave it so that like when the message comes through, it's like she like looks up and smiles, and you're like, it's hard for me to imagine that she would look up and smile. Because you'd be moderately disappointed at the prospect of not making
for sure,
it,
you still would be,
even if it's okay. So
even
it's
if
like,
it's okay.
So my interpretation is that that's her getting the note that she makes it. But maybe letting it be like mildly ambiguous is more satisfying because you as the viewer can choose to interpret it however you please. Which I think is ultimately cool. But that basically brings me to the end of my notes with only other like mild thing was I did very much enjoy and like as the credits start playing, we get to go inside of Mom and Dad's head where they're asking Riley about like, how was camp? And Riley gives like a 1-word response or whatever. And then you see that sure enough, inside of Mom and Dad's brains, there also is anxiety.
Yep.
And it seemed like I think it was like Dad's brain where he's just like, go back to your cave or something.
Yeah, he's like, it's like that's all, we only got 1 word, and like, seems about right.
Yeah. But I like that because it almost made me think that like inside of our brains, it's not that we need to make anxiety go away. We need to find a place for anxiety to safely exist, to be available when we need them, but ideally not run the entire
the whole thing. Yeah.
So.
And it's sort of like, still lets you know that like they didn't just forget that the parents like, whoa, shouldn't they have these emotions too? It's like, yes, clearly they did still have them. They do still have them. They still live up there. We didn't talk about nostalgia.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah,
nostalgia was so funny.
I know. Yeah.
But clearly, like as they've grown up, like their more core, central, basic emotions are like the ones typically running the day-to-day operations.
Right.
Yeah.
So that being said, I really loved the movie.
Yeah, same.
I thought it was really
me
great.
Too. Fantastic.
Do you have a score?
I think I'm thinking I'm landing like around like a 93.
Yeah, literally 92 was the number I had in my head.
There you go.
Yeah, that's high praise. I think it killed it. It seems like it's doing well at the box office, which I'm excited about. If for some reason, I know like when we meet a lot of you out in the world, oftentimes you're like, yeah, watch your reviews and then I'll determine if I want to see the movie later. So if somehow you made it this far and haven't seen it, then I definitely
should
think
go see it.
Worth going to see. I think it's gonna be super great. And I am very curious to see, do you think there will be an Inside Out 3?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Like I didn't think there'd be an Inside Out 2.
I know, so, yeah. It felt so complete.
Yeah. But like I mean, I'm super down for Inside Out 3 if they want to get there. I mean, I'm sure like it's, there's more phases of life to go through.
Well, you mentioned nostalgia, and that was sort of what made me think about it, because it definitely felt like nostalgia's inclusion in the story to me kind of felt like this, like, come back in 10 years, and it was like, okay. Like, is that like a little like we'll see you,
like, we'll see you later on. Like Riley's graduating college now,
Right, right, yeah.
Going into the world.
Oh,
gotta start on our own,
becoming a parent or something.
Right, yeah, getting married, something, who knows?
Yeah.
Oh, becoming a parent, oh, don't do it.
I know,
oh, no.
I know, yeah, then the cycle begins again.
That would be such a sad one. I'm already feeling it.
Man. I know, yeah.
I know, I'm like, what are they doing for Toy Story 5, you jerks? What are you gonna put in there? Is you gonna bring Andy back? Don't do it. They're gonna do it.
They're gonna bring Andy back. You can't do Toy Story 5 without Andy. Woody's gonna come back.
I know.
He's going to help Andy.
Don't even.
They're gonna be reunited.
Stop.
I know. Yep. Y'all, this has been so much fun. We hope that you have enjoyed our review of Inside Out 2. Be sure to leave all of your thoughts about the movie in the towel section down below. But otherwise, until next time, bye!